Hello everyone, and welcome back to the series Landscapes, taking it up a notch. This is class number 5 in the series, and it's subtitled Warping and Scaling for Maximum Wow. And we're building a scaffold. And when you build a scaffold, you put in the first height of it, the first section of it, get that nice and secure, and then you put another section on top of that, and that's how you go up. Well, that's how we're progressing in this series. So if you find something is a little confusing today, simply step backwards a class or two and you'll find the answers to your questions. Okay, so what we're going to do is jump right into Lightroom, and this is the shot that we'll be talking about today for warping and scaling. It's a focus stack. I was using an 11 to 24 wide on this shot, and even though I was at an f11, which I find to be pretty comfortable for this, you can see how the focus kind of falls off right here. So I got this in focus on a tripod, shot it, then I refocused without moving the camera on this, shot it, and then I shot the background shot. So with these 3 shots, then I took them into Photoshop as individual layers. And you can use Photoshop to align and blend. That's one way to do it. Or you can also use Helicon Focus, which is a professional's choice many times. The only issue you get into is when you have things that are moving in the frame. You can see the water's one way here, it changes, and then it changes again. So when you do your blend, you end up with some funny looking things sometimes. So I found in this case it was just easier and better to use layer masks in Photoshop on the different layers, and I just blended these 3 layers together. And when I did that, I ended up with this result. So from here on back, pretty much everything is in sharp focus. Fell off a little bit in here, probably because I was so close to the shell. But that's not going to be an issue. You'll understand that more in a minute. So once I had this focus stack blended inside of Photoshop, and took it in the camera raw and did some editing, and brought it up to where I thought it looked pretty good. Colors were good, contrasts were good, it wasn't clipping, but it just lacked something. It lacked a little bit of that wow that I was looking for. So I asked the question, well, what does this photo need next? And the answer to my question was, this shell needs to come into more prominence, I think. And also I want to accent some of these leading lines that are forming here by the wide angle perspective bending that it does. And I wanted to accent that some more. So I took this shot a step further. And what I did is I was going to start off with some warping, so I went up to the rectangular marquee tool, and I'm going to put that selection on the bottom part of this photo because I'm going to warp this. I don't want to warp the sky. I don't want to bend the horizon or anything funky like that, so I just put a selection on there, so this is what I'll be warping. And by the way, you can do some of this perspective control in Lightroom, as most of you already know. The thing is, in Photoshop, you can just do part of the photo like this at a time, which is kind of cool. And this tool is really powerful. So it's Edit, Transform, Warp to get started with this thing. And you can see how to put these points in sort of a tic-tac-toe grid. And you can pull on these points to pull the photo around and move pixels, which is really kind of cool. It gives you a lot of control. And so in order to make this more prominent, I just thought maybe what I'd do is start tugging on some of these points to see how much I can expand this shell in size and prominence within the photo. I can move them this way, and also see how these lines are sort of developing too, these leading lines, which is kind of cool. I like that because those leading lines point to the subject, the focal point, which is that bigger shell. I'm going to pull that out of the frame because that's kind of a distraction. I might even pull this one down to get it almost, yeah, I'll just pull it out of the frame. And I'll pull this one down a little bit more. I might pull this over a little bit. I'm just trying to get these shells so they sort of look like they're not too weirded out. And by the way, you can put your cursor down and pull anywhere in the frame to move pixels around. So it's kind of cool that you're able to do that. Okay, I kind of like that, so I'm going to come up here, I'm going to check that, hit that check mark to lock it in, and then because you have a selection still active here, you need to hit Command D or deselect. And you can see that thing is already coming forward in prominence, more so than it was. It's already quite a bit more prominent in the frame, but we're still going to do more. I want that thing to be even more prominent yet. So I'm going to go to another pixel bearing layer, and this is the same action here in the TK7 panel is what they call the claw, because it takes a number of fingers to pull it off. It's Shift Option Command E on a Mac, and it gives you a layer which basically merges all the layers below and gives you a pixel bearing layer with that merged information in there. So now that adjustment is locked in. And we're going to do this one more time, hitting Command minus to shrink it a little bit so I have some room. I'm going to grab the rectangular marquee tool again, and this time instead of using warp, I'm going to use the scale tool. So I come up to Edit, Transform, Scale. You could also hit Command T, it'll get you to the same spot. Now with this tool, the points are a little different. You don't have the grid, you just have these points on the outside. And what you can do is you can tug on these points and get things to grow in size and so forth. You're scaling, okay. If you want to just pull on a single dimension of the picture, you can do that too by holding down the Shift key, either originally, but you can see how it just pulls one dimension, okay. What I'm going to do is come down here to the bottom, and I'm going to hold the Shift key down and pull down first to see if I like the look. It's kind of elongating that shell a little bit more than I like, so I'm going to let go of the Shift key. I'm just going to pull on this and expand this shell and all the other shells along with it. And I sort of like that look right there. I might pull this one. I'm going to hold the Shift key down and pull this a little more just to make that shell even a little bit more prominent in the frame. And I'm going to just kind of leave it right there. I'm going to hit the check to lock it in. You could also hit the Enter key, and then don't forget to hit Command D to deselect the selection. Okay, now there's one last thing I'll do. I'll add another pixel bearing layer, pardon me. And I might want to make this a little bit larger than it is. So I'm going to use the rectangular marquee tool to grab the top half of this thing. And I'm going to hit Command T, which gives me the scale tool, as I mentioned. And I'm going to hold the Shift key down now. And I'm just going to pull this up. Not too far, because I kind of like that light on the upper part of the frame, but it's expanding the waves in the water a little bit, and I sort of like that, so I'll go ahead and lock that in. I actually kind of like what's going on there. I like it. I've got radial lines going out this way, even more pronounced. The waves are a little bit more pronounced. I got the shell just kind of like in your face down here, which is what was intended. I really sort of like the results. So let me take you back to the beginning of this process in Photoshop, and I'll show you kind of where we started, right? And we're talking about impact, right? That's we've talked about this before, that your ultimate goal ought to be to influence and affect your viewers in a way that just makes them feel good about the shot for whatever reason. Maybe they love the beach, they love shelling, whatever. But you're trying to create that emotional impact so that they they derive some joy from your photography. So that's the before, and I'm going to pop it so you'll see the after, and you can see it's a completely different impression. You might like the initial impression better, but I was reaching for impact, and I think maybe we got it. So that's it. I'm just going to come out and sign off here, and thank you for tuning in. Hope you'll find the scaling and the warping are tools to your advantage when you're wanting to get more impact in that foreground, particularly in the foreground. But let's say you have in the background here, you'll notice there are some trees. Sometimes with a wide angle lens, these trees will look like this. They'll be aiming this way on the sides, and you've got to correct them. And in that case, you can use the warping tool selectively to stand those trees up straight and so forth. So it's a very handy couple of tools to use, and I hope you find them useful. Thanks again for tuning in. It's always great to spend time with you, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Take care. Bye.